Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to get started now. I'm Lucinda Vakura. I'm the Alfred Group's Business Development and Marketing Director. We're glad that you're here. Most of you, I realize, are familiar with the Alfred Group, but for those of you who may not be, the Alfred Group is a national full-service consulting firm. We work with clients across the country, and we provide services like fundraising, strategic planning, communications, crisis management, data analytics, and much more. So really, our goal is to provide you all with the tools and the resources and the empowerment to have the biggest impact possible in your communities. So today's webinar is titled Effective Donor Communication Strategies During COVID-19. We're really glad that you're here with us for this discussion at a very urgent and timely time right now for all of us. So before I turn this over to Brenda to moderate our panel discussion, I have just a few housekeeping items. So first, this webinar is being recorded, and we will have a copy of the recording at the end of the presentation today. You'll receive an email with that recording. After this webinar, you will be prompted to complete a very short survey. We encourage you to do so. It's really, truly very short, and we definitely appreciate your feedback. Everyone who's joining us today is in listen-only mode. You will have an opportunity to ask questions. So we will have a Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. And if you have a question at any time throughout the webinar, simply click on the Q&A icon, which is at the bottom of your screen. And that question will go to the panelists today, and we'll answer as many questions as we can at the end of the session today. And then finally, we invite you to join us on Twitter. We'll be live tweeting and using the hashtag NPOstrength, which is down here at the bottom of your screen. And we invite you to join the conversation there as well. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Brenda to kick us off.
Thank you, Lucinda, and welcome everyone to our webinar. We would like to thank you for taking time out to be with us this afternoon. Might I please have the next slide, Lucinda? So thank you for joining us. I am so excited today because we have an opportunity to really kind of step back from what we all have been experiencing over the past number of weeks as it relates to COVID and the pandemic. The Alfred Group is a national firm, and from the onset, we have been bombarded by our clients just wanting to know what they should be doing relative to effective donor communication. They also have been wondering, should we be communicating? How should we be communicating? We want to be sensitive to what they're going through as well. How do we continue to engage our donors in a very authentic way so they still understand that it is still business as usual, but in a new landscape, in a new environment that we're now delivering our services. So our nonprofit community is really struggling as it relates to not only addressing the many needs and increased demands placed upon them for services, but also how do they engage with their donors in a way that honors those donor relationships, while at the same time take advantage of some of the newer technologies that were taking place, that we're now making use of, as well as helping those donors to feel even more connected to the organization. So today, our esteemed panel is really going to step into the middle of this and provide some very helpful strategies on how to effectively communicate and engage with our donors. What are some of the channels that we should be looking at, and how do we leverage those channels even more effectively? And we're very happy as well to have a real live example from an organization whom we think has done it well. So let's introduce our panel for this afternoon. Our first panel is Alyssa Conradi. Alyssa is co-founder and president of Prosper Strategies. She is recognized as an expert by nonprofits across the country for her ability to craft and lead marketing and communications programs that advance nonprofit missions. Thank you, Alyssa, for being with us this afternoon.
Thank you for having me. Hi, everyone.
Kathy Schaefer is principal of Kathy Schaefer Consulting. Kathy has a gift for immediately getting to the heart of communication challenges, asking the right questions, and recommending strategies that help organizations navigate through crisis to a place of confidence. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you.
And our esteemed practitioner, who's truly on the front line, is Kara Gussie. Kara is Vice President Kara is Vice President of Communications and Development for Family Services of Northeast Wisconsin. Kara brings nearly 20 years, yes, she started when she was just a teenager, 20 years of experience in the nonprofit and fundraising world. She's worked on everything from event planning, board and volunteer management, strategy planning, annual and major gifts, and marketing communications. Thank you, Kara, and we look forward to hearing more from you.
Thanks for having me. Hi, everybody.
Well, we really want this session to be as interactive as possible. So we're going to start out with a polling question that we're going to ask everyone to respond to. Can you please pull up the polling, Lucinda? So just click on your response, and we're going to see immediate results. So now is the time. Go.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to know, how has COVID-19 changed your world? How are you feeling about your donor communications today? Do you feel that your organization has a good handle and you're feeling pretty confident? Are you scrambling but in a good place? Are you struggling and need advice? Or do you just feel like crying?
And there are still, I can see a lot of people are still voting. So I'm going to keep it open for just a couple more seconds while people cast their vote. Everybody gets an opportunity to do so.
All right. The neat thing about this polling, it gives you immediate feedback, and it's going to be the lead into our first question of the panel. Lucinda, are we almost there?
Yep, I'm going to close the poll right now and share the results.
Okay. Well, it looks like people, it's been what? It's been about 3 weeks, and people are scrambling, but looks like you're feeling pretty comfortable with where you are and moving forward. So 60%, that's terrific. I would be interested to hear from Kathy and Alyssa. What are some of the challenges that you've been hearing from your clients from across the country? And what have they been grappling with since the onset of this crisis? Kathy?
A couple of themes that have bubbled up for me are, one client was saying they were trying to figure out how to be quote unquote respectfully opportunistic. And so they want to reach out to people and they want to take advantage of this time when everybody's got their attention, but they want to make sure that they do it in the right way. They want to encourage people to give, they want to encourage people to stay engaged. And so they want to strike that balance. And the second thing I'm hearing is people are concerned that if they're asking about immediate issues or immediate funding for particular, services for clients, that a social service agency or another one might be hurting their chances later on in the year for their annual appeal or a gala. They're sort of struggling with that balance between those two. That's what I'm hearing.
Alyssa, what are you hearing?
Yeah, I am hearing many of the same things that Kathy is hearing. Most of our clients at Prosper Strategies work in either communications or development or both. And from sort of both of those arenas, I'm hearing some real stress about the responsibility that people are feeling to help their organization survive through this crisis by mitigating the risk of lost fundraising revenue. So a lot of our clients and our friends in the sector have been talking a lot about their fears around lost fundraising revenue from canceled events, from the fact that there's almost more competition than ever for fewer resources, and yet our organizations are needed more than ever in many cases right now. And then sort of this longer term apprehension about what is going to come after the peak of this crisis settles down. I think a lot of us are predicting or preparing for a recession, and knowing that that means that a lot of donors might be tightening up their belts and not giving in the same way they have previously as we kind of make it through this difficult financial time. So I'm hearing a lot of organizations worrying about not just this current moment and this crisis right now, but what happens in 6, 12 months when we're still possibly in a recession as a result of what's going on. So we've been having a lot of conversations with the nonprofits we work with about what can be done now and prepared for in the future to mitigate the risk of lost fundraising revenue. Whether that means taking what were in-person events virtual, whether that means creating new types of appeals that you didn't in the past, or possibly getting really creative and thinking outside of traditional fundraising, thinking about what you can do to create perhaps revenue generating programs and services, a social enterprise arm for your nonprofit, things like that.
Yeah, we certainly saw a lot of that on the heel of the Great Recession of 2008, 2009, when organizations really did have to become much more creative around how do they continue to invest in their organization, invest in their people, and look at alternative ways of generating revenue. Tara, I know as a development professional, when something like this hits, typically the first place that an organization looks to is the development and marketing function. And with you wearing both hats, I know you probably had to jump right into action right away. We would love to hear what did you do? I mean, what were some of the first steps that you took to move your organization ahead in response to this crisis?
Yeah, and luckily, so family, just a little bit on family services is that we're a human services agency that we have a 24/7 crisis line, a sexual assault center. We work with families on child abuse prevention and parent coaching. And so we work with a lot of people who are already in crisis and who need their connection to their therapist or their home visitor, or that lifeline that they have to keep themselves mentally healthy and emotionally healthy already. So we were luckily deemed an essential service, so we were able to keep going. However, we also wanted to really make sure that we were taking care of our own staff and our own frontline and everyone else out there, and playing a part of with our community and keeping people healthy and safe. So luckily, we needed to first put out a message out there about how we were continuing to serve our clients. So we needed to jump out there right away to say, and we had a number of communications that went out to say how we were continuing to do that, whether we were still allowing them to come in and meet with their therapists and see their home visitors and things face to face. And then 2 days later, we had to change track and say we couldn't do that anymore. So we had to close our doors to the public. So that's what we concentrated on first. Then after that, that's when the messages were coming in loud and clear from our field staff that were out there saying to or meeting with our clients, and our clients saying, at that point, that's when everyone was going to the grocery stores and hoarding toilet paper and formula and diapers and wipes. And a lot of our clients, and that's also when buses were shut down. So a lot of our clients, A, when they were getting to the grocery store, couldn't find what they needed. And then B, after the transportation was shut down, didn't have a way to get there. So again, their relationship to our organization was kind of their lifeline. So we immediately put it out there within, I think, a day after the shutdown was announced that our families were struggling and they were having a hard time finding what they needed. And so we made a very specific ask to our entire database to say, we have people who can't feed their babies, who can't diaper their babies. Can you help? $25 will get us 1 can of formula. And can you help us get there? And we had an incredible response right away, because I think it was tangible. It was a small ask. And it was an urgent, immediate need that we were seeing from our families.
So what was so when you put that out, and what was the result of it? I mean,
Yeah, that's a great question.
Did you raise your goal, or did you give them a target, or how did you?
Yeah, we really didn't have a goal in mind. We were hoping that we were going to get a bunch of money in order just to be able to feed some of these people and make sure those families were feeling safe and well. And in the first day, we raised over $7,000 from over 100 donations. So we felt that that was really successful. I was hoping, if we could get to 5 or 10,000, that would be great. And where we're at right now is 160 donors with over $23,000 raised.
Wow.
And so for our organization, I'm pretty pleased with that result.
Yeah, we can talk a little bit more later about retention, because we also know during times like this, you tend to acquire new donors, and the challenge typically is retention of those donors.
Right.
Let's look now at the second polling question, Lucinda, which looks at what are the vehicles and channels that we're finding to be effective in communicating with our donors during this time. So here, we have the different vehicles. So now is the time to cast your vote. How are you communicating most frequently with your donors during this time? Again, these are okay. All right, Lucinda, are we ready to post the results? Well, while we're waiting for the results to be posted, I would be interested in hearing from Kathy, just to kind of start us off, what advice would you give organizations relative to how they communicate in the channels they're using?
Well, I think that it all needs to flow from a strategy. And you need to be thinking about the immediate, of course, but also the midterm and the long-term strategy for your communications. And this is something that I tell all of our clients, because you need to be thinking about where you want to go and where you want to get to. And so in the immediate need, in the immediate time, you might have some immediate needs, and you might be using a lot of email or particular forms of communications. It all needs to be driven by the audience then too. So what's your strategy? So you mentioned retention. Is our strategy now to gain more donors? Is our strategy to keep the donors we've had all these years? Do we need to reach out to our long-term big donors, and how are they accustomed to hearing from us? If they're accustomed to face-to-face meetings, pick up the phone, get on a Zoom chat, whatever works, and try to continue to nurture those relationships, because of course it's all about the relationship. And this might be the time, to try a few new things with existing donors, and maybe as a way to get new donors, although you don't want to get too fancy. But my big point is, think about your strategy at the beginning, the current timing, the mid-level, and the long term.
Alyssa, any thoughts from you on vehicles and how?
Yeah. From the vehicle perspective, I think that now is the time to use all vehicles available to you, quickly evaluate what seems to be resonating most with people, and then move your strategy in that direction. I'm the biggest fan of digital ever, but this is actually a moment where I would say digital should come second to more traditional channels. And I think that now is the time to really foster personal relationships with your donors. Hopefully you've been doing that all along, but there's never been a better time to pick up the phone, to check on how your donors are doing, just personally, right? Everyone is struggling or scared right now, and also craving connection. So there's never been a better time to pick up the phone, ask how your donors are doing, tell them honestly how your organization is doing, what you're struggling with, what you're planning on, how things are looking for you in terms of your financial situation and runway, and just really have that authentic dialogue. I think if you're doing that and devoting most of your time to those efforts, and then supporting and supplementing that with digital channels like social, like email, I would encourage things like this, webinars and conversations, digital conversations, Facebook Lives with your donors. But those things, in my opinion, should be in support of personal conversations. And I think the more authentic and transparent you are right now with your donors, the more likely they are to step up and support you when and if they can. So this isn't the time to sugarcoat things or, say everything's going fine at our organization. It's the time to talk really honestly about the needs that exist within your organization and the communities and populations you serve, and ask for what you need to make it through this time.
Yeah. Kara, how are you approaching this?
Yeah, it's a tough decision, because when we started doing this, of course we had that, like, everyone and their mother was getting a COVID email from not only your organizations that you support, but from Old Navy and, every other business that was also sending something out. So we certainly felt that there was a risk we were going to get lost in the shuffle. But at the same time, what we recognized was that we're assuming that our supporters wanted to hear from us, because we kind of felt like if we kept quiet, that probably meant that we were all doing fine, and that our clients were all doing fine. And that was not the case at all. So we felt like Alyssa and Kathy have referenced too, is that we needed to be transparent, we needed to be honest, and we needed to tell people quickly what was happening, and what our people out in the community were seeing and hearing. So we assumed that people wanted to hear from us. We also assumed that, or decided we needed to stay really mission focused, right? We wanted to make sure that people understood that, our mission is protect, heal, and care. So we wanted to let them know how they could do those things, how they as a donor could live that mission out in their own lives. And I think a lot of people, are they're sitting at home, and some are really busy and some aren't, but people want to help in times of strife and trouble. People want to do something. And if you can't go out and volunteer, the thing you can do is you can give some money. And so I think that gives people an outlet to make themselves feel good and feel better when they know other people are struggling. And you got to be really flexible and open to change, because whatever 2 days ago, what our communication plan was going to be is in the next day might be totally different, completely different. And not just from 1 week to the next, 1 day to the next, maybe even 1 hour to the next. So I think we're starting to kind of get into a little bit of a rhythm now, but we still have to be really, really open and flexible to changing our everything that's going out right now. We're supposed to be sending out our impact report for one of our programs. So our impact report, we're changing, and we're putting an insert that has a COVID-related message to it, because we don't want to sound tone deaf either, right. But we still want to get our message out there. And we are trying to utilize every possible channel that we feel comfortable using and that we're good at. And for us, that we're making sure that our emails and our website and our social media and our Google business accounts and everything that we have, that we are utilizing, all are consistent and say the same thing.
Yeah. You know what? I think you said some really key things around, number one, using a variety of channels, and using channels that you're good at, right? And so, when we think about, I want to ask you about frequency, because I think that's another question that audience members may have a question about. Yeah. How often are you communicating? And is every communication an ask?
Definitely not. Our not every communication is an ask for us. We actually put out, so the first couple of communications was really surrounded about how we were responding and how we were responding to clients. Then our first email ask was really that big one where we were asking for formula and diapers. Then a few days later, we sent out another one that was basically a gratitude, because we were all pretty blown away by the response for people. So about 2 or 3 days later, we sent something out, of course, that still had another donate button on it. Because that might be, maybe people didn't see the first email, so it was kind of a soft ask with the second one, but it was more of a thank you, look what you guys are doing. And then from there, we're now kind of pushing a lot of that onto social media, because we don't want to inundate people with
Yeah.
email after email after email. Because again, for us, April's a big month. It's Child Abuse Prevention Month and it's Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And, you know, there was an article that just came out in the USA Today that said that during this time of increased anxiety and togetherness, some families are really enjoying this time together, and other families who were struggling already are struggling even more. And their children no longer have other trusted adults to be able to go and talk to. So we're still pushing that message out now, but again, we shifted it so it has a COVID related message to say there's a lot of other stuff. There's a lot of stuff happening going on as residual and that has consequences from this COVID thing. So not everything is an ask, but we're still trying to tell people what we're doing and what's important with that COVID kind of twist to it.
That's right. Lucinda, do we have the results from the polling question?
We do. Let me share those now.
Interesting.
Wow, interesting. So we see email is the predominant mode of staying connected here. Well, that leads to our next question. Yeah. I would love to ask our experts here, what drives effective communication, the audience or the channel?
Well, I always like to say that the audience determines what the channel should be. And you want to pick a channel that resonates with your audience. And so it was interesting to see those poll results, because probably many of these organizations that are on our webinar today have been communicating for a long time via email. And so that might be the preferred method. I would really love to see even more phone. We saw a fair amount of phone, so I would love to see more of that. But also I think a little more social media could be helpful, because people are spending more time on their social media right now. And I also think that these video chats, which, you know, how many of us used Zoom until, 3 weeks ago very often, so I think people are getting more involved in that. One thing that I think it's really important now is to make sure that your channel suits you well. So if you want to show your audience, show them and tell them. So if you need a lot of visuals and pictures and videos, use a channel that works that way.
Yeah. Kara, did you have a perspective on what works well for you?
Yeah, in my opinion, as somebody in the field, I think you should utilize whatever you've been utilizing and what you're good at and what you're comfortable with using. There's so many things and advice that we're getting from a lot of people that say, what you should use for what demographic and what you should use for all, there's so much out there. But now, in my opinion, is not the time to go and try something brand new in order to reach an audience that you've never reached before. I think you need to be super consistent with what your message is and use whatever, because there's a lot of smaller organizations out there that don't have huge communication teams. So if you're, communications person, or if that's you, if you're only comfortable with Facebook, then just really, really do that well and feel comfortable with it, and be consistent in your messaging between your emails and your social media and your website and all those types of things. But times of crisis to me is a little bit overwhelming to try to learn something brand new. So just pick what channel you want to go for, and then just do it as well as you can.
Yeah, there are a couple of things that I've seen some of our clients use. I'm looking at a message now from one of our clients where the headline is "Insider Update. I miss you. Let's get on a Zoom call." So this message came from the executive director, and she said that I'll be on the call along with other staff members to give real-time frontline update about how COVID-19 is affecting our community and our work, answer any questions you have, and of course, pray together. So she's asking her, I think this went to her insiders group, which I know because we're working with them on a campaign. So this message went to all of their major donors, whom we call insiders. So again, she's just set up a time for her donors to come and learn what's going on, have this face-to-face interaction. The other vehicle that we've really been recommending to our clients is the use of video. I mean, it's so easy to do video on your phone. It doesn't have to be sophisticated, but making a video and having a video message go out to your donors or your donor base to give them an update on what's going on. Kathy?
Yeah, Brenda, I wanted to add a couple of quick examples, if I could, of
Yeah.
things that I've seen that have been pretty good. And these are some big nonprofits, so small organizations can do this their own way. But, you know, the Art Institute of Chicago did a beautiful, it was an email, but you could click on an introduction to the El Greco exhibition that's there now. And you could actually walk through and learn something. So that could be good for parents. Or donors to remember why they give. You want to show organizations why they love you and why they have given to you in the past. So Steppenwolf Theater in Chicago did another wonderful thing. I thought this is now probably 2 weeks ago, but they shot out a video that was never before seen footage to the public of early days of Steppenwolf. So you got to see people like, you know, John Malkovich and Gary Sinise and all the early people who are now huge stars now. And that, again, you're remembering why you love them. And then the third one I'll mention just came through yesterday. Hubbard Street Dance company had to cancel, they canceled their gala, totally canceled, but they just flat out said, so we're asking you to give how much money to us now that you would have spent on a ticket, and don't forget the paddle raise, give us that much too. And I thought that that was a pretty brash and bold way to do it, but it goes with their personality, and probably their donors are used to hearing that. So you have to think about why your donors love you, why you get along with them, and then tune your communications to them in that way.
Yeah, you know, Kara's point of your donors care about you, otherwise they would not be your donors. And now is not the time to go dark or feel that you can't talk to them. I think the longer you wait to be in communication with your donors, I think you may become irrelevant, because you want to be relevant to what is going on, and you want your donors to know that you are responding, whatever that response may be. You know, we have our third and final polling question, because one of the things that many of our clients are trying to figure out right now is their spring appeal. We're sitting right in the midst of when those direct mail pieces or online solicitations are about to go out, or were planned to go out. And so we want to spend a little bit of time now talking about how you are approaching your spring donor appeal. So let's take a second now to respond. And I know this is a really big, it's a big question mark, I know, for many organizations, because when we put our budgets together for the year, you know, we're depending on these dollars coming in this fiscal year. And certainly we've had a number of clients move their event to the fall. So now we're really bridging 2 fiscal years and trying to figure out how do we cover any shortfalls in the current fiscal year. So the spring appeal is really going to be critical to many organizations' ability to deliver services and prepare themselves for what's to come this summer. So it's interesting to see that we have 39% they're definitely sending out as planned. So that's really interesting to see our development folks staying on track with the plan, which is so important. So when we look at strategies that we've seen work from many nonprofits as it relates to spring appeals, Alyssa, what are some of the strategies that you've seen work and really result in strong results for some of your clients?
Yeah, thanks, Brenda. I'm happy to see that most of you are planning to send your spring appeal out, because that's my first piece of advice is if you typically do a spring appeal, do not hold back on doing one this year. You need to continue, though your message may need to change, you do need to continue that sort of regular cadence of activities and asks if you want to, like we talked about at the beginning of the webinar, mitigate that risk of lost fundraising revenue. So my first point or suggestion is just find a way to do your spring appeal, but do it a bit differently. I think your messaging definitely will need to change in light of this COVID crisis. And what Kara mentioned before about making sure that whatever you're putting out into the world doesn't feel tone deaf, even if it's a communication that you started developing way back in February, go back and edit that message, include an insert, do something to make sure that it's clear that you're tuned into the moment. Because I think one of the worst things you can do right now is have your donors feel that you're out of touch or tone deaf in this moment. So that's, the most important priority. A couple of other things that I'm seeing work well with clients we're working with is I'm seeing a bit of a pivot from spring appeals that were once very ask focused to become more stewardship focused. So organizations like Family Services, Kara's organization, that have done some sort of special ask around COVID already are using their spring appeal to thank those donors, to celebrate the success. They're attaching an additional ask typically on top of that, but they're starting with that stewardship, that thank you, and talking about what they've already done. Second thing I'm seeing work well is, if you can, and I think this is not as easy for all types of organizations, but you want to try to tie your spring ask to something COVID, a COVID related need. If you can do that in a way that doesn't feel inauthentic or like it's a huge stretch, many of your organizations are directly addressing or indirectly addressing in some way the fallout from COVID. That could be through child abuse and sexual assault prevention, like the example Kara shared. That could be through addressing food insecurity. If you're an animal organization, it could be addressing the increased flow of pets into shelters and the need for adoption and fostering. There's a lot of different ways you can kind of make that connection. Can be a bit harder for an arts organization, for example, but even in that case, I think you can make a tie between lost revenue and being transparent about the fact that your doors are closed, but your organization really wants to make it through the situation and come back better than ever. So find that tie-in if you can do it authentically. I definitely, in your spring appeal, would suggest, kind of my third tip here is promising to report back in a shorter term than you usually would on what the support from the spring appeal achieved. So if you're making that ask specific to what's going on with COVID, this is such a current top of mind concern for people, and they're going to want to hear what their support did in short order. So promise to report back on that. I think the spring appeal is also a great opportunity to sort of tease what's to come for your organization in the months ahead to the level you can, right? Knowing that a lot is uncertain right now, but if you have events that have turned to virtual events coming up, if you're planning for year-end giving, make some indications of what's happening next, and the fact that your supporters will be able to continue to build on what they do in the spring. And then one last very specific point, but I think it's really worth noting. You want to, in your spring appeal, if you haven't done this elsewhere, or maybe even just reiterate it, you want to emphasize some outcomes from the CARES Act that have actually made giving a bit more appealing. So most of you probably know this, but donors now can have an above the line deduction, whether they itemize their tax returns or not, for charitable giving based on the CARES Act. So you want to mention that. One of our clients, the Leukemia Research Foundation, put out a very specific, not even appeal, but just sort of notice about that, wanting to make donors aware that that's an option. And I think that's really important to include in any appeals right now.
Good, thank you. Kathy?
Sure. I noticed one of the questions that was asked of us on the Q&A for this webinar was about whether or not to start an emergency fund. They were thinking about starting an emergency fund and doing an appeal for that. And I believe, basically, and this ties on to what Alyssa was just saying, that if you tie it to COVID-19, everybody understands immediately and viscerally the need for that. And even if you don't need that money right this second, I think that you should do it now, because this thing is changing so fast. I would absolutely endorse that. In fact, I know of a foundation in Northern Michigan that's already asking an emergency appeal, and they got a donor to match the first $30,000 of it. So I think that it's a great idea, and I think that you should do it.
Kara, any thoughts?
Yeah,
what are you doing?
I think, that's exactly what our fund was used for, was an emergency fund. And the fact is that one thing that I would add onto there is and just like a lot of our appeals already do, but this one particular, to add that sense of urgency, that for people to give, like, our clients or our organization needs it right now. We don't need it, in 6 weeks. We need it right now. And part of that too is that we're going to be feeling long-term effects from this, and our clients are going to be feeling long-term effects from this. So we need, I think, conveying that urgency will really help people understand that you have to, don't wait. And that's how we're utilizing that fund right now in order to help people who are going to have long-term problems making their rent and getting the support they need. And who knows when we're going to be able to get back out there and create those relationships again with those one-on-one meetings. It might be a while. So that's what I would add.
Yeah, when we think about spring appeals, typically we think just about direct mail. But we want to just punctuate, communicate even with your major donors. I think what we're going to see happen with especially mail, we probably will experience some drop off in mail campaign just because what's going on, with the economy. And I would put forward to you to think about your most loyal donors. Your most loyal donors understand your organization, and they understand why it's important for your organization to remain strong. And I think some of your loyal donors may be willing to give more, so they may be making up for some lost revenue that you may experience as a part of this whole COVID-19. So please, so I would just say, be in conversation with those most loyal donors. They've gotten you to where you are today, and they want you to continue to be strong. So I would say for spring appeals, continue to be in front of those loyal donors because they're going to probably make up for some potential shortfall. I just received something from another client where they had a donor who was giving at one level, he's giving more because he knows the need is even greater. So again, you can't be afraid to ask. I saw in one of the questions was around, should we be doing a newsletter now? Again, I mean, Kara, what would you say to that in terms of a newsletter?
I think
that just shows you, yeah.
Yeah, I think it all depends on your bandwidth of your team, right? So if depending on what is all coming up and what it looks like, if you feel like you have the time and you would be able to get your message out quickly and effectively, and that would be a great way to do it, then by all means do it. I mean, I know we've been talking about that for years, but of course it's always been put on the back burner because other things are more important. Well, this whole emergency thing has really shifted a lot of things for us, and we're putting things on the front burner that hadn't been. So if this is what pushes you in order to do some of that stuff, great. So if you've got the time and the energy and the wherewithal to do it, then why not?
Yeah, even if you just did an update, Kathy?
Yeah, I was going to say something like that, an update of what you're doing. And also, I think we have to remember many people are being harmed financially by this virus. However, there's still a lot of people that are busier than ever at work, are continuing to be paid, want to give back, want to be asked. So I think that you can't be bashful, and we need to be thinking about those people who can still give, who may be willing even to step up because, again, everybody's saying now we're all in it, we're in this together, we want to help each other. So don't miss that opportunity.
That's such a great point, and I think my line would be, don't say no for the donor, right? At least ask and position it. Alyssa, I saw a question around moving events to the fall. I know you've been doing a lot of work talking to your clients about how they should be approaching events. Any thoughts you want to share that would be helpful to our audience around event planning and moving, and what are some of the options there?
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much to cover here. We actually did an hour-long webinar on considerations around moving in-person events virtual yesterday. So perhaps we can distribute the recording link to everyone here where I go into a whole bunch more depth on that. But I'll kind of cover, there were sort of two questions on the virtual events front that I saw, and I'll cover both. The first was a question about when to make the call about whether you should move an event. And the person who asked the question said they have an event in November. Right now, what we're recommending to our clients is that you make the decision to either cancel, postpone, or go virtual if your event is currently scheduled for between April and the end of July 2020. Two exceptions to that. One, if you do a lot of your fundraising for your event pre-event and you've already earned 80% of your goal for the event. If that is the case, if you've done all that fundraising already, I think you should call it now. I think you're unlikely to make up that additional 20% by trying to do something virtual with the additional costs and things that come from that. And then the other exception to that would be if you're in a situation where you are just going to be in a lot of financial pain. If you cancel because your venue and your food and caterers aren't willing to work with you and be flexible, you might need to make other considerations in that case. But overall, if your event is between now and July, I think it's the time to ideally go virtual rather than cancel. If you cancel, you lose the revenue. If you postpone, who knows when you'll be able to have it again. So I think for November right now, I would continue to communicate with your donors and let them know that you're continuing to explore all your avenues, that it's a little bit too early to make a call, and just be open about that. But I don't think you need to make a call on a November event yet. Hopefully we'll be back to some semblance of normalcy by November. And then the second question about virtual events was just, what do these virtual fundraising events look like? So the webinar we did yesterday breaks that down in a lot more detail, but there's basically two models that we're seeing work really well. The first is what we call a live online event, and that's where you bring your donors together through a platform like this: Zoom, GoToWebinar, Facebook Live, YouTube Live, Instagram Live, or a combination of those. And during that event, you have an MC, you have speakers, maybe you have performers. You bring things like a silent auction or a live auction or a paddle raise or some combination of those together into the online platform. Possibly you're doing teams or tables that you're selling tickets and doing fundraising with those groups. And you really aim to replicate a lot of the elements of an in-person event in about a 60 to 90 minute live online window. We're seeing organizations do really creative things in that respect, where, for example, they're sending their attendees like an Uber Eats gift card and encouraging them to order their own food in, since they would have had food at the event, where they're having performers perform live from their own homes. There's a lot you can do, and I wouldn't hesitate to have that sort of live online event because you're really worried about the tech. You can do a lot of dry runs, and right now I don't think donors are expecting high production quality or complete perfection. So I would consider that approach. And then the second model that we're seeing work is what we're calling a giving period. So that could be anything from 1 day to about 1 week of various different sorts of giving activities. So you might run a silent auction for 2 days. You might have Fund a Need for a few days. You might have peer-to-peer campaigns running. And all the while you're reporting on progress. Ideally, you have kind of like a central portal where you're showing progress toward goals, and you're reporting on how kind of all those activities come together to earn a certain amount toward goal. Some people are still calling that a gala if they're aiming to replace a gala. The big difference between that and the first option is you're not expecting everybody to get online at the same time, and there's a little bit longer time frame to make it work. So that can be an option if your organization has a bit less tech savvy donor base, or you don't expect people to want to join by video. But I think any of those can work really, really well. And in our webinar, we talk about a lot of the tools that you can kind of string together to make it all work. So there are a lot of options out there. There's no kind of one tool that does it all, but a lot of good options you can string together.
Yeah, we have a real interesting question in the Q&A where there's an organization, it looks like many of their COVID-related expenses would be reimbursed by the government. And so they're trying to decide if they should still be making an ask when they're not exactly clear on what the need is right now because of the reimbursement. Any thoughts from our marketing professionals? I mean, I don't know if they typically do an appeal this time of the year, but what's your sense? Because not every organization has been as impacted by COVID. There are certainly many who have been, but then some who aren't, who are still wondering, should we still be making an ask, even if we don't have a COVID message platform?
I'll just chime in. I'm not a fundraising professional, but I'm a communications professional. I think that you have to just tell them what's happening, and I would again in this spirit of continuing to communicate with people, I would tell them as this unfolds, this is how it's looking now, this is what might happen, and here's what we're going to do about it. But I think you want You want to have some certainty, and the certainty is we're going to help wherever we can the people that our agency always helps.
Yeah. Kara, any thoughts from you? I know you're in the midst of it, but all of your needs sounds like there's a COVID platform that you're leveraging.
Yeah, we have that advantage certainly of having being able to tie our mission back to our COVID related things, and I think that's the big unknown, right? With the CARES Act and everything else, because certainly some of our employees who are out usually in the field are not able to keep all of their hours up. So there's a lot of those expenses. One of the other things I think that's important for organizations to remember too, especially in your own community, we just had 3, our United Way, our United Community Foundation, and the Packers, because we're in Green Bay, all come out with their own COVID-related emergency funds. So make sure that, in your area that you're keeping track of what other organization, if you are in need of something that might not be attractive to donors, we're realizing that we're sending, old 4-inch thick laptops home with some of our staff trying to do virtual visits because our technology is a little antiquated. So those types of things we're probably going to be, asking some of these other granting organizations to help out too. So you could have a donor that might be interested in something like that, but there are other pots of money that are going to be out there too. So, and I know that's a little off topic of what your question was, but
no, that's okay. You know what? When we were talking about communicating with our donors, I have a client yesterday whose board member called me and said, we would like to help the staff because they realize that the staff is shorthanded and overwhelmed. And I'm like, that would be terrific. What did you all have in mind? He said, we were thinking that we could call some of our donors and just update them on what we're doing because they are a human services organization. And he said, do you think that would be a good idea? I'm like, I think that would be a great idea because now you're expanding the bandwidth of staff who's been so busy, doing all of the marketing and data entry and trying to steward. But again, it's an opportunity for us to leverage and use our volunteers. Because as Kara said, everyone's looking for how can I help? What can I do now to help my organization? So utilize your volunteers, get them on the phone calling and thinking and updating. So this is a great opportunity. I think also we have a great opportunity as we think about those new donors. What are we going to do with them to continue to keep them connected to our organization? So it can't be a one-step process. I spent the bulk of my career with the American Red Cross. And during a time of disaster, we were just flush with new donors. So we spent a lot of time trying to increase the retention for those donors. We have about 7 minutes left on our call. And what I would like to do is just get any final thoughts from our panelists that you think about what are the 3 takeaways that you want our audience to leave this webinar with this afternoon. Let's start with Kathy.
Sure. I think number 1, it's all about strategy. You have to be thinking strategically while operating in the moment. And you have to be nimble. We talked a little while ago that things are changing quickly. Your strategy has to be nimble, but it has to also be forward-looking, and you can't ever get away from strategy. The second thing is out of sight is out of mind. So while you don't want to inundate people, you do need to keep communicating. And the third thing is, I believe that leadership and confidence by those leaders in your organization inspire action and inspire loyalty. So put your people out there, show everybody what you're doing, create a sense of community and that we're all working together.
Thank you. Alyssa?
I so love everything Kathy just said and agree with it fully. I will just reiterate a couple of points that I made earlier as my big takeaways. Then I have one new idea to add. Be authentic and transparent. Don't sugarcoat the need right now. This is not the time to make it seem like everything is going great. Of course, you don't want to be overly fatalistic either, but communicate transparently with your donors. Tie your cause to the COVID crisis if you can do so authentically. Make really, really specific asks the way Kara and her team have. And above everything else, build those relationships right now. Now is the time for relationships. And in that vein, just one new thought to add that we haven't touched on yet, and I want to make sure we cover. is find a way to activate your donor base, not just by asking them to give, but by giving them activities and things to do that are more in the virtual volunteering realm. Recognize that a lot of your donors have extra time at home right now. They want to do things to help. That's why we're seeing everyone bust out their sewing machines to make masks, right? So think about volunteer opportunities. Think about things that work well for people who have kids at home, who want to get their kids involved, and have real actionable calls to action beyond just that ask to give financially. And realize that when you do that, you actually are building relationships that will lead to financial contributions down the road, even possibly from people who have never given before. Because the more involved they feel with your organization, the more likely they are to give in the future, even if they don't have the means to do so right now.
Fantastic. Kara?
Yeah, and it sounds like a lot of people are already doing this who are watching this webinar, but obviously don't be afraid to communicate with your supporters. That's the biggest one. A lot of them are waiting to hear from us and how we're doing. Obviously, we've talked about this, is utilize every channel that is at your disposal. And the one thing that what we're really trying to do, and especially whether it's a blog post that we're doing or an email that we're sending out or a social media post, is we're not just making it all about us and our organization and how we're struggling. We want to add value every time we communicate with our supporters. We want to add value to that reader's life. So if there is something that we can offer them that is important to how their mental health is going and how their well-being is, it's not just about me. It's not just about my organization. It's not even just about the clients we're serving. It's also about what my organization can do for them. So adding value to them in that type of communication is really huge for my team and for what we're doing right now. And then the other part of it is just to really be real. I love this kind of like mode of communication where I used to work in higher ed and it was so like stuffy and institutional and corporate sounding. And I'm loving the tone of being able to be conversational and informal and real and make it feel like someone who's writing that as an actual person. So putting your heart into it and making it feel authentic and real, like Alyssa has mentioned too. It's a person that cares about that reader and it cares about what's happening in the world is going to endear other people to your organization too.
Thank you so much, panel. I don't know if there's a last question. I just saw a new one pop up, so let's see if there's a short last question that we haven't already addressed. And it looks like, is there one, Kathy?
I saw one. There was one. I was just flipping through the questions. Somebody said, we're not a direct service organization. How do we communicate with our donors right now? And it reminded me of something that I wanted to say earlier and I forgot to say, which is now's a time to educate people. Now's a time to entertain people. Now's a time to engage people in things that they maybe never tried before. So I'm thinking this is a for-profit organization, but I know a bookstore that has been putting out every couple of days sort of funny posts and things that you can do, but they're funny, they're entertaining us. Other organizations are sending out, the Illinois Arts Alliance has been sending out information about the plight of artists and just about what's available to artists in general. So, I mean, putting out information is good for an organization that's not a direct. But don't forget having fun. People still want to have fun and entertaining people, depending on your organization and if it makes sense.
That's great advice. Well, we're at the top of the hour, and I'd like to thank our panel, Alyssa, Kathy, Kara. Thank you so much for being a part of this endeavor with the Alfred Group. We have a slide where you can reach any of us with additional questions. If we did not get your question, or if you have additional questions, please type it in and we will make sure to respond. Again, this webinar has been recorded. And here we have everyone's contact information. So please, we're here to help and we mean it. So type and send us any questions that you may have. And the Alpha Group will be hosting a number of these webinars in the coming weeks. And we look forward to your participation and thank you again. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Take care.
Bye-bye.